Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you've got an appetizing lunch already and the coffee mug is full and you're ready for us to start. A common question will be, is this being recorded and the slides are available? And the answer is yes. And just an apologies for the kind of late start. So welcome to this Lunch and Learn session. It's put together for those that have got an interest in application development, and thank you for attending. And back in history, when I joined Microsoft, we often had learning events at lunchtime, and we was encouraged to attend by a bag containing a free lunch and drink. And so these were known as kind of brown bag events. And then sadly, over time, the lunches disappeared, and then for many years, they were still promoted as brown bags. But with low lunch expected, we knew them as empty bag events. Nowadays, they're kind of rebranded as Lunch and Learns. It's very different nowadays in that it's easy to deliver to remote audiences. So this is an empty bag event. I've got nothing to bribe people to spending an hour of their time other than content that I hope attendees will find compelling and useful. This is a bit of a trial event. My intention is to run the event regularly, but it's kind of subject to getting feedback, validating we're doing the right things and providing content that gives value. My aim is to focus on AppDev topics that are new, they're interesting, and perhaps unknown by many. So to introduce myself, I'm Mark Harrison. My role is an Azure AppDev specialist, and I'm part of the various account teams aligned to our customers in the professional services sector. The invites went to associations that organizations that I'm associated with, and that means I'm available to you. So if you want an AppDev conversation, you need help, education, guidance, you want me to give some input on what you are doing, I just encourage you to reach out. My contact details are there. Put your name on your speed dial contact list. We've got a Q&A channel. We may struggle, the three of us, to both present and answer the Q&A. So if we don't answer the questions fully, they're a bit terse, our responses, or we miss them, again, just please reach out and let's have a dialogue after the session. So as part of the account team, I also work with other Azure specialists that cover the infrastructure and the data platform technologies. To distinguish my AppDev role from theirs, I wrote a paper where I share what I do, why I do it, and I touch on the current AppDev trends that I see and the themes that I'm frequently asked to cover. So again, this is what I do. Reach out if you want discussions on any of those topics. And then when people reach out to me, I've got access to a team of very knowledgeable, experienced cloud solution architects who can help me when the ask is of an in-depth or complex nature. In today's session, I'm pleased to be supported by two such CSAs, that's Genady, Belenky, and Dave Phelps, and they will cover the two main topics of today's call. So since joining Microsoft, I've worked across many technologies, including e-commerce, content management, collaboration, security, data center infrastructure, but more recently, I've been focused on AppDev, which is a return to my roots from my pre-Microsoft days where I was a developer at several software houses. I personally feel that the AppDev space is the most interesting and exciting place to be, especially right now, as I see you people involved with AppDev are the real driving force for the success of your companies. And I will explain why I believe software engineers and developers are so important, starting with this picture. So this is Fifth Avenue, New York, and it's got the Trinity clock and the Flatiron building. And that clock is really symbolic to the message here. Time passes, things change. If we look at the same area 120 and 100 years ago, we see exactly the same area, the Flatiron building, and we can even see the same clock. But the big difference is in the top, we see many horses, and in the second picture, we see it's completely replaced with cars and trucks. There's not one horse, all because of innovation caused by the internal combustion engine. Now think of the impact that change and innovation had on organizations and associated jobs. The blacksmith who was looking after the horses, he is no longer needed. The guy that went around sweeping up all the horse manure off the streets is no longer needed. And the organizations that sold horse and carts, they're no longer needed unless that organization was resilient and reinvented themselves. And a resilient organization will be those that have an awareness of disruptive technology and can develop talent that can make the most of it. So if we think about what's different today, the challenge for all is the rate of innovation is getting faster and faster, and business competition today can be really fierce. For organizations to survive and thrive in this new era, they must embrace digital transformation. That is, organizations must exploit software technology to innovate, differentiate, and disrupt. And it's investments in applications that will enable innovation and provide business advantage over competitors and their offerings, and so will ensure resilience and drive growth. So when we talk about digital transformation being fundamental for business success, it's software innovation that is at the core of digital transformation. And for that, you need application development. And the catalyst for application development is software developers who've got an increasingly vital role in the business value creation and will be at the heart of innovation endeavors. Successful companies will be those that empower software engineers and developers to achieve more. They need the best-in-class tools, platforms to unleash their capabilities, along with a culture of collaboration and sharing. And to enable organizations to learn how they can accelerate business performance through development excellence, Microsoft have published the Developer Velocity Report, as well as updates to the Developer Velocity Assessment tool. By answering a few simple questions, you can benchmark your maturity score relative to your peers in your industry, and then get actionable guidance to boost developer velocity and then drive better results. So that's why AppDev and the people on this call are so critical to innovation and the organization's success, and why I'm delighted to be working in this space. And so hopefully I've also given some nuggets there that you can use in your next career appraisal and articulate why you are so important. And when I take the Microsoft mission statement and map that onto my role, I came up with these two statements. These are my kind of pole star and kind of direct what I must be doing. So there's empower every organization to achieve more by exploiting software technology to innovate, differentiate, and disrupt, and empower every software engineer to achieve more by unleashing their capabilities with best-in-class platform and tools, education and guidance. So repeating myself, this is what I do. Reach out if I can help you. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the next part. We're going to move on to the clever stuff. We're going to pass the baton on to Genady, who's going to talk about remote development and GitHub Codespaces. I just need to kind of rewire the switchboard, switch a few plugs around, and we'll get Genady online. So, Genady, can you share your desktop?
Yes, absolutely. I will start with a presentation. And then after the presentation, I will come back and do some live demos. So the presentation was actually, my slot was announced as Codespaces, but Codespaces is just one piece of the possibilities you have if you are working remotely in different environments and developing code with Visual Studio Code. And let's have a look what Visual Studio Code is and what are the motivations of the Visual Studio Code developers, architecture and remote extensions. We will have some demos, and at the end of the event, you will have an opportunity to ask some questions, or even during the course of the event as well. So, okay, so motivations. We have developers working on different operating systems using different programming languages, and the development and test are becoming increasingly remote. So, for example, many people are working with huge monorepos, and team members are using huge VMs as a remote dev box. They use some cloud-based tools as well during the development. And if you are working this way remotely, you will probably have some poor development experiences. So if you are working with virtual machines, you will probably go with terminal and VI, Vim. Um, if you are working with remote desktop, you will have some lags in the UI. You are using mouse lag. It's hard to set up on Linux. And you have browser-only tooling solutions for this particular scenario. So let's have a look at the architecture of Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code is existing already 10 years. 10 years ago, it was started by the team led by Eric Gamma, and who was previously was developing Eclipse. And the team decided after a couple of iterations that they need to split the Visual Studio Code into different processes and make this process to talk to each other. So, for example, you have the UI process where your code is being rendered. You have different UI extensions there. And you also have an extension host process for each particular programming language or extensions you are going to use. So on this picture, you see C# extension, for example, Python extension, and you are also working with some other processes, such as terminal process. You are running your application in a different process. You are running your debugger. So it's a multi-process by design. And yeah, so the idea is, why shouldn't we be able to run Visual Studio Code, this separate components on different in different infrastructure pieces? So let's introduce it and run Visual Studio Code Server as the piece which is called extension host process on a different machine, on a remote OS. And then the idea would be to go even further and to introduce a layer between this Visual Studio Code Server to different environments. And this is how remote extensions for Visual Studio Code was actually born. And through the remote extensions, you can work, you can develop your software on different platforms. And this is what you currently have. So if you are working with Windows as your development machine and you want to develop something for Linux, you might use this separation between different processes in Visual Studio Code to connect remotely to a Windows subsystem for Linux. And you can use the full Linux distro on Windows. If you have remote virtual machines, you can also use the language extension server on this virtual machine. You can also work remotely with the containers running on your local machine. And this is great because you can even do things you wouldn't actually do installing some tools on your machine. As you will see later, I will install something in the containers I would never use, currently I'm not using in my infrastructure, for example, developing in Go or in other programming languages and frameworks. And finally, you have a possibility to have a completely remote environment managed for you by Microsoft. It's a VM container-based environment, and you have web and desktop access to this environment. I will demonstrate this a little bit later. So yes, summary. It's a very short presentation. You develop on the same operating system you deploy to or use larger or more specialized hardware. This is what you get. You can sandbox your development environment to avoid impacting your local machine configuration. You can make it easy for new contributors to get started and keep everyone in a consistent environment. You use tools and runtimes that are not available in your local OS and manage multiple versions of them. You can develop your Linux deployed applications using the Windows subsystem for Linux. You can access existing development environments from different machines or locations, and you can debug an application running somewhere else, such as customer side or in the cloud. So that's basically it. So let's start with the development. Let's start just right at the beginning. Let's go to to GitHub and create a new repository. It will be remote VS Code. Let's just create it. Let's just add a README file to this, create a directory. Okay. We are actually done. Let's copy the URL of this repo and clone it on my local machine. So we'll use git clone. Okay. We'll change this local directory, and we can also see what is on the machine. You see the README file that was generated on GitHub is landed on my local directory. So let's create a project. Because I'm a C# and not .NET developer, I will create a very simple console application. But you can also create web APIs and some other projects as well by using the templates. So let's create first the git ignore file, and this is a great there is a great command that .NET you can create .NET new git ignore, so that it can ignore everything what is related to .NET Core projects. Let's create a project .NET new console. So, and let's output the result into this directory. .NET new, yes, fine. Okay, so if we'll have a look at it, this is what we've got, and let's let's start Visual Studio Code here. And this is probably what you already know. So the project was created, and I have my my program. Let's change it and say hello VS Code. Okay. Let's add the required assets we need for debugging and starting. So let's run this application and see what happens. Pressing F5. Hello, VS Code. So no magic here. Let's do another stuff. Let's just understand where we are. So you see we are on my Windows machine right now. Okay, let's do the next step. And this is exactly what I mentioned before. This is a remote work with Visual Studio Code. For example, you have different sections here. The first section is dedicated to the Linux running on my local machine, a Windows subsystem for Linux. So I can open a new window, or I can reopen the folder in VSL. So in this case, I will be working. Working on Linux on the same project. And
Genady, there's a comment. Can you increase your font at all? Is that a bit tricky in VS Code?
It will be tricky, I think. So this is.
Okay, thanks.
So you have different sections. You have the section dealing with VSL. You have another section dealing with SSH, where you can open your environment running on a different machine. You can work with containers, and you can also finally work with Codespaces. Okay. All right. So let's open this in VSL. Reopen folder in WSL. Okay. some recommendations for this. Okay, let's run this project. Let's check where we are. Terminal, and let's say uname. And you see that we are on Linux now. So let's run the application here. And because .NET Core is can run on many operating systems, you see that this application is also running on Linux. All right. So let's go to the next session. You see the remote Visual Studio Code remote shows you that you're currently on WSL. You're working with Ubuntu. What else can we do? We can also let's close the remote connection, and let's reopen our folder. Work, and let's try to do something with the containers. Okay, so if you open this menu, you also see the remote containers try sample. Let's have a look at this. Try sample. And here you have a variety of programming languages and samples you can do. You can experiment with Rust. You can experiment with Go. So let's take Go and see what will happen. See, my container will be created. And now you see that I have my Go container running locally on my machine because I installed Docker Desktop. And then just let's also check the uname. We are uname. You see, we are on Linux again, in a Linux container, and let's run the application. So let's open in the browser. This is how Go is giving me the response. Let's go back, stop the application, and check this Alex name. Let's say that Alex name is Genady. Let's run this application again. Open the browser. Hello, Genady. Excellent. We go back. We can stop it. We can add a breakpoint and start it again. Okay, open in the browser. You see Visual Studio Code is blinking, so it means that we hit the breakpoint. Let's just continue and run this application and see the result. So yes, we see the result. Okay, so this is we worked with the containers. As I will not demonstrate today SSH, but let's come back to our local version which we created. We open the folder. It was remote VS Code. And let's see the changes. We have a couple of changes here. So let's commit the changes into my local Git. So commit. Control Enter. So and we can push these changes directly to my main branch on GitHub. So today we are not working with pull requests, so that would be the right way to deal with this. And then let's have a look at what we have in our repository now. So you see that my program is there saying hello VS Code. And what I can do here, if I open this menu, I can say open with Codespaces. Let's create a new Codespace. This is the container which will be created remotely for me at GitHub. And here we go. So this is another option if you want to work remotely. Even if you don't have a machine where you can install Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code, as you probably know, is not only running on Windows, but also on Mac OS and on Linux. But if you don't have any of these opportunities to have this environment, you can work remotely through the browser as well. So, okay. And let's then run the code and see what will happen here in the browser. So actually, you see it is hello world, hello VS Code. And let's also try to work with breakpoints. Let's run it again. So you see that it stopped working at the breakpoint. Let's go to the breakpoint and run this again. So yes, those are the possibilities for remote developers. And if you want to explore more options available for you, just go to Visual Studio Code, to the documentation, the overview. And this is, sorry, this is the wrong side. This is the remote overview. So this is the site where you should start exploring all these different options. So thank you very much. I hope you have some questions and we will come back to you with our answers later. Thank you.
Thanks, Genady. I mean, just let me tell a story where I found these kind of remote containers really useful. I once had to do a Python demo with the function runtime, and I knew nothing about Python, or near zero about Python. I just knew it was going to be a lot of work kind of getting the environment ready, but actually it was really, really simple. I had it up in minutes by just using a remote container that had all the Python and functions runtime all ready for me to go. So it just saved a long, long time. Okay, next on to Dave, who's going to cover application insights. So Dave, can you share your screen?
Can you see that okay?
All good.
Fantastic. Okay, so yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I'm sure that I've worked with quite a few of you already. My name is Dave Phelps. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft here in the UK, and I specialise in app dev and all things to do with Azure, but with a particular slant towards serverless technologies and PaaS. So yeah, I'm going to talk about App Insights today. Don't have that long, so I'm just going to whiz through a few slides and then go into some demos, which hopefully will be interesting. And as Mark said, if you have any questions or want to follow up afterwards, then feel free to reach out to Mark, or if you know me already, just ping me an email. Yeah, so what is Application Insights? So it's a way of being able to collect telemetry from your solution, and by solution, I don't just mean a website or something. I mean the end-to-end solution. So from maybe a web app that you might have, or a mobile application or something. So with Application Insights, we can track the telemetry that is taking place on that client. But also, if that client is then calling into a service of some description, could be a service in Azure, could be a service hosted elsewhere. But we can also track the telemetry from those services too. And if they then make a call to some other service as a dependency, again, we can also track that. So you can get this end-to-end view of your process or of your business process. So that telemetry is then sent into Azure, where it's stored as part of the application insight service. And from there, that's where you can gain some insights into what's happening with your solution, which could be performance related, kind of trying to understand what are the call times for my APIs, for example, or how long do pages take to load, but also what's happening with my application. And it has maybe more to do with the browser side, but how long are people staying on pages? Where do they go next? What do they do next? How many people go to one page, but then they don't move on to the next? And also from a failures point of view, being able to understand how many times your application is failing, for example. And behind this, we have a big data query engine, which allows you to go and write queries similar to the one you can possibly just about see on the screen there. But you can go and slice and dice this data. There's a bunch of stuff that's out of the box that you can use, but you can also go and write your own queries to go and grab this data. So how does it actually work? So the client or the service uses App Insights. I've got some details later on SDKs, etc., but it's available across a whole bunch of different platforms and languages. And from there, that telemetry is then tracked, and it's fairly automatic. You can track your own custom events if you want to, but typically this would be fairly automatic, with that data then just being batched and then sent off to App Insights. And once it's there, then you can do things like generating alerts from that data. And by alerts, I mean that you can either use the out-of-the-box alerts that are there. So you can, for example, go and check the response codes and say, if I've had a response code that is not the 200 OK, and if I've had 5 of them in this particular time frame, then I'd like to go and generate an alert. And that alert could be an email, an SMS, it could be calling into some kind of workflow like a Logic app to go and raise some kind of some kind of event that is going to be picked up by PagerDuty or ServiceNow or something like that. So where do these events come from? So the two that I'm focused on today are application and Azure resources. So by default, there are a whole bunch of services in Azure that support App Insights, things like API management, Logic apps, functions, etc. The websites, web apps, app service, all of that kind of thing. The wider umbrella service called Azure Monitor, which App Insights is a part of, also has log analytics for logging data from virtual machines, etc. And you can still join up that data. So if you have a VM running as part of your solution that might be hosting your service, and that's writing out to an event log, whether that's on Linux or Windows, you can actually correlate that back to your app or your service that could be writing out to application insights as well. So as I mentioned a second ago, you can see on the screen here the kind of things that you can do with that data, whether it's exporting our data to somewhere else, whether it's generating alerts or using the built-in kind of services that we have, enabling you to go and slice and dice that data. But you can do out of the box, which we'll see in a sec, or use something like Power BI, or as I said, you can go and write this out to your own stores if you want to. So yeah, App Insights can be used across any cloud, and there are a bunch of SDKs that allow you to go and use App Insights across a whole bunch of different languages, but we can provide more details on this afterwards if you want to. Conscious of time, so I've got a quick demo, and not many people know that App Insights actually works with Power Apps as well. And this was something that happened relatively recently, earlier this year. So you can build a Power App and wire it up to App Insights. It's as simple as just entering a key. So my Power App is then going to call a service I've created in API management. That's then going to call into a Logic app, which is then going to go right out to Service Bus. And I've got this running on my phone. So I'm hoping that that's going to work okay. So if we just take a quick look here at Application Insights. So this is what it looks like. This is what you get when you first come in. The first thing I'm going to show you is that this thing called Application Map. And Application Map is quite interesting, because what that's going to do is it's going to show the dependencies between the different services in my business process. So I've got here API management, which I'm calling into. I can turn on, I can say whether I want errors to be included in here. So I'll just tick that on. So I've got API management, which is calling into my Logic app, and then that's got a few dependencies here. I'm calling into a service bus, and I'm calling into a couple of HTTP endpoints. And I didn't have to do anything to get this. It just happens automatically because of the correlation that App Insights is using between these different services. So I just configured App Insights, ticked the box, and I didn't do anything else. So if we take a look at this one, you can see that I've got a few failures in there. And if I click on this, then I can do a whole bunch of things here, but I'm just going to click on Investigate Failures. And in a second, you can see the failures that are occurring here across a timeline. But if I go in, and if I had other failures here, they would show up. If I go and click on this 401 response, it's then showing the requests that that took place that caused the failure. If I go and click on one of these, then I get a whole bunch of details here. But the thing that's particularly useful to me is that I can see the response code here and the response body. I can also see the payload. So I can immediately understand what's going on with my service and kind of go and diagnose what's going on with that. And if this was some code that I'd written rather than in this case being a PaaS service, then I'd be able to go and see the call stack in here as well. But what is quite nice is I could say, well, is this thing actually a trend? Is it something that's been happening over time? So I can just click on show trend over time. And hopefully this will come up. There we go. So here we can see that actually that wasn't a one-off, that I've been having a few of these today, which I've of course been manufacturing, but if this had been happening over a longer period of time, then of course we would see that listed here. So App Insights, when that data is logged from your solution, it does take a bit of time, a minute or two, in order to get into the service for you to look at that data. But we do have this thing called live metrics. If we take a look at live metrics, what this will do is actually connect directly in real time, pretty much real time, to the application. And if I just switch across to my phone, and this is quite cool actually, this is your phone. If I kind of click on my app here, this is a Power App that I created. You can actually drive it directly from here as well. So if I click on Browse Products, and if I click on, let's order a Series X, and if I click on place order, then hopefully we should see a bit of activity. I've not called it for a while, so it's probably going to take a bit of time to warm up. There we go. So there we can see some requests coming through. Let's order another one of those. And so I'm now just going to manufacture a failure. So I'm going to switch back to API management, and I'm going to force a security failure from my service. So for now, if I go, I'll just move this over so you can see. Now, if I place an order, you can see that we've got an exception has taken place, and we can see that the request failure rate, and in fact, you can see the exceptions down here as well. It's also showing the service that I have online. So if I was scaling out using something like functions, for example, then in real time you would see all of the different different servers that would be scaling out behind the scenes. Of course, you don't have to worry about that, but it is quite useful sometimes to know that your app is actually scaling. Right, so let's go and move that over there. And I'm just going to go and turn that off again, just momentarily. Okay, so we've seen some of the things that you can kind of do directly in here, and I'll jump into some of the Power Apps related stuff in a second. But what you can also do is, what's going on here? There we go. Is we can go to the logs. So I mentioned this query language that we have behind App Insights and Log Analytics. So if I just close that for a second, this is a little bit slow. So I go to my queries. I can go and look at a query by status. So sorry, no, that's not by status at all. This is by status. So what this is showing is just the number of responses that have come back. I've had some 200, some 401s. Ignore that. That's an error in my query. I'll tidy that up later. But you can get a nice dashboard that's going to show you all of the different response codes, which I did just by looking at this table called requests, which is where all of my data is being written. And so, you can go in here and kind of see all of the data that's available to you, which is kind of cool. But the other thing that's quite nice is that if I'm also logging some data from the payload, in this case, it's some kind of order process, I can also start creating dashboards, or queries rather, that are going to show me a breakdown of those orders that are being received. And this is quite nice from a business perspective, because yes, you can write queries that are going to tell you from an IT perspective what's going on with your solution. But this is quite nice to be able to just create some queries that you can give to the business, and they can see in pretty much real time what's going through the platform. And what I can then do is I can say pin to dashboard. And if I go and pin that to my lunch and learn dashboard like this, there we go. And if I now jump, in fact, I'll show you that in just a second. But the other thing I can do is look at page views. And this is off my Power App. So you can see the different screens here that have been hit. That's all being logged, and I can go and see all of, there's a whole bunch of information in here that's quite useful. Can it tell me it's an Android machine and the make and model, etc., and my location. But I can also just do
Can you keep an eye on the time, Dave? Because
Yeah, how long have I got?
you've got like minus 10 minutes.
All right. By name. Okay, I'm almost done.
Okay, thank you.
So there you go. So we can see that the home screen's been hit 11 times, browse product 18, and then purchase product 13. And I could render that into a pie chart as well, just in the same way. What is going on with that? My paste is not working very well. So the final thing I wanted to show, just really quickly, as I mentioned, Power Apps supports App Insights, and of course, if this was some kind of web app or single page application, it would just work in the same way. And I wish this would be a little bit quicker. That might be my broadband, possibly. So I can get a view of the users that are using my app. But what is quite interesting is being able to go and look at the different events that are occurring. So I'll just wait 1 second. This is the final thing I'm going to show. Then I'm done. So you can see all of the different events that are going on, and these are all of the events from my APIs, but I can also go and tick on my web pages. So if I go and, my Power Up pages. So if I go and click on those, there they are. That's kind of quite nice, but I could also then go and do it by name. And what that's going to show me is the number of calls that have taken place for each one. I can then, I don't think I've got time to go through this now, but I can also create funnels. So I can choose a starting point and say, well, how many people moved from viewing a product to purchasing a product? And I can do that directly in here. So as long as you've got App Insights enabled, you'll be able to just go and kind of understand what the conversion is and where your customers are going to kind of target those places of your app where maybe people are getting stuck. And all that is just out of the box. That's taken a while to come up. In fact, my browser's now locked up. So I guess that's me done. But if anyone wants to understand a bit more about this, then just reach out afterwards and we can go through it. Oh, there we go. It's finally come up. But anyway, okay. I think that's me done, Mark.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Could you have a look at some of the questions? There's some interesting questions coming up that I think useful if you could help answer. Yep. Okay, so the next topic we were going to cover is kind of DevOps, and I'm sure everybody's on a DevOps journey of some sort, so we don't need to labour too much on this. Some are going to be starting out, some are going to be mature and experienced, and the DevOps is this engine that drives innovation and just reduces that time to value, and it enables organisations to develop, deploy, improve products at a much faster pace than you can with traditional software development approaches. Now, we often talk about the inner and outer loop. So the inner loop is that iterative process that the developer performs when they write, build, debug code. The outer loop is that when they build, deploy, and monitoring, and that's kind of where the App Insights that we just saw kind of fits in. Now, what I'm going to do is demonstrate a feature that I believe not many people are aware of in Azure that enables you to quickly start up a project along with a sample application, the infrastructure as code, the repos, the build pipelines, the release pipelines or actions if you're using GitHub, and then the application insights. Now you can wire all that up manually, but this kind of wizard just really accelerates things. So let me just show you that, and it's just certainly useful for learning and demo purposes. Just before I do that, I just wanted to call out this kind of FAQ, frequently asked question. I often get asked, what's happening with GitHub, what's happening with Azure DevOps. The history of this is Microsoft got this great, mature, feature-rich product with Azure DevOps, and then we went and confused things by acquiring GitHub, this kind of community where 56 million plus people, developers kind of gravitate to, and the home of many open source projects. And people want to know what's happening, why have we got two products in this space. The kind of the short answer is, what we've done is we've got a common engineering board across the two products that's driving both products, and each can take the best of the other side. So for an example of that is GitHub Actions have inherited the code base used by Azure pipelines. There's integration between the two products. You know, Azure pipelines can use GitHub repos can use Azure boards. So the top level message really is both products will exist for a long time. Both are getting investment. Both have got roadmaps, and I've got links there to both the DevOps roadmap and the GitHub roadmap. Now, the truth is probably one day they will converge, but that day is far, far away. Okay, let me show you this, how it's really good to easily wire up a DevOps project. And it's something you go to DevOps Starter and you end up with this screen here. And what you can do is, I want to add a new project. And the first thing it's going to ask you, are you using GitHub or are you using DevOps? And for this demo, I'm going to choose GitHub. And then what it asks is, what platform are you using? So if I'm a Python developer, I can choose Python, and I can say which framework, is it Bottle or Flask or whatever. If I'm a Node developer, again, it will ask, what is the framework I'm using? Express, Sail, or whatever. Java, likewise, you know, what is your framework? Is it Spring or JSF? I'm a .NET developer, so the first it's going to ask me is, am I .NET or am I .NET Core? Let me choose .NET Core. And then it's going to say, well, what is the platform? And I want to run it on Kubernetes. Do I want to run it on Service Fabric? Web app? I mean, the Kubernetes here is a great example where this takes a lot of, does a lot of the kind of the work for you. It sets up a Kubernetes cluster with the Helm charts. Again, you could do all that all manually, but it just kind of just accelerates that whole process. What I'm going to choose is just keep things easy. Web app. Give it a name. What we can then say is what region. So I would say I want it in North Europe, and I can say I want the free tier, and then I can just change the location here, North Europe, and I say review and create, and then that will go off and create me the whole kind of infrastructure as code, the pipelines, etc. This will take a few minutes to do. Let me just show you that in Blue Peter style. I've already created two. I've got a GitHub one and a Azure DevOps one. Wrong link. Let's so if I look at the GitHub one, we've got this kind of dashboard, and we've got links off to the repo. Let's just authorize, so I can go off to the repository, and what we can see is the actions and the workflow. So it's kind of just run it, and it's got the application is running here. It's just a simple website, but it's kind of wired all that up for me in just a few clicks. You can do that all manually, but it's just kind of accelerates that whole process. If I look at the Azure DevOps equivalent, I've got this kind of dashboard here. It's going to show me my links to my repos, my build pipelines, my release pipelines. I can see it's done unit tests. I can see it's done functional tests. I've got linked to my app insights. So I can go off to the build pipelines, for example. I can go and see it's already run it once. I can edit that pipeline, and it's created all this for me just by means of a few clicks. So a pipeline is a task runner that's going to do a series of tasks. That's the release. That's the build pipeline that creates the build artifact, does the unit tests, and then if I go and edit the release pipeline, in case I've only got a dev, but if I wanted a staging environment and a production environment, I can easily clone that. Last thing, I'll just show you the repos. What we've got in the repos is a sample application. So this is where you maybe want to replace it with your own application. It's got the unit test, it's got the functional test, and then it's got the ARM templates as well, infrastructure as code. Repeat myself, but Kubernetes is a great example. Creating an ARM template for a Kubernetes cluster with all the Helm charts, a lot of work. This just does that for you. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. And let's talk about .NET. So the .NET is this kind of modern, innovative, open source development platform, enables you to develop high quality applications faster. And it's kind of, if you look at the last two Stack Overflow developer surveys, .NET was the most loved framework. We're now on yearly cycle, so each November a new version of .NET gets released, and each alternate year is the long-term support version. .NET 5 is bringing all the various variants of .NET together. So that's including like the .NET Framework, the .NET Core, Xamarin, and we will have a single version of .NET going forward. Now, my message here is everybody should be looking to migrate their apps to .NET 5, .NET 6. The code is smaller, faster, it's more efficient. If you're running those apps in the cloud and you're paying for the usage, if things are more efficient, you've got better cloud density, it's going to cost less to run. Those apps can run on Linux. Better option if you're doing container-based workloads, and it's lower cost than running on Windows. I also, just to kind of flag, next week, I understand there's going to be some support timeline statements about .NET Framework. So, you know, if you're on .NET Framework, think about getting off .NET Framework into .NET 5. Now, there's a link there to an upgrade assistant. It's pretty new, but what it is going to do is kind of take out a lot of the kind of the pain of moving from .NET Framework to .NET 5. It covers many code patterns, and I understand that the product team are keen to work on anybody that has a code pattern that this upgrade assistant doesn't currently address. Next one, application modernization. Microsoft can help you modernize your apps and migrate to Azure. What we have, our solution assessment team have got access to a product that can help you migrate those applications to Azure. What it does is code scanning and database schema scanning, and it will give a very comprehensive report on the kind of the maturity of the code or the suitability it is to migrate to the cloud. So any issues that it detects, it gives, you know, line by line, detailed instructions, what the developer needs to do to make it suitable for migration to the cloud, and whether that's moving ideally to web apps, you know, PaaS offerings, but also containers and virtual machines. It currently supports .NET, Java, PHP, Python, support for SQL, MySQL, Oracle. I understand there's new support for other things coming. We talked on the previous slide, the .NET Framework to Core migration. Again, this can help this to do that and identify, like as part of the code scanning, what a developer needs to do. The product is called Cloud Pilot. There is a license cost for Cloud Pilot, but Microsoft will pick up the license costs of that and training your people to use that tool. And there's a little caveat there, subject to qualification and funding, but we should be able to do that for people. Okay, the next list is just an ad hoc list of top of mind things that are new. I'm going to just cover this in a couple of minutes. If things here are of interest, just reach out. First one is Azure Communication Services. So this is a new Azure service, SDK. It's built on the kind of the battle-tested services that power Teams. Enables you to build real-time audio, video communication, SMS messaging into your applications. This has hit GA, general availability. 2 changes to API management. Validation policies have been included. These defend against rogue attacks caused by malformed payloads. And then support for availability zones. That gives higher availability in a single region. We've released a build of OpenJDK with LTS, long-term support. Microsoft have committed 50 patches to this, and this will be the default distribution for Java 11 across all Azure managed services, and we will have OpenJDK 17 by end of the year. Visual Studio 2019 16.9 has been released. It comes with a number of enhancements around developer productivity, including a lot of kind of new tooling around Git. That will be the next long-term servicing release. Arc is our technology to enable to put compute where it makes sense. So that could be in your own data center, on an IoT device, in the factory, wherever. You put the compute where you want it, but you can still control it from Azure. So Azure becomes the control plane, so you can do management, policy, monitoring from central, but the compute is out on the edge. We've released Kubernetes and machine learning. So you can run this functionality, a Kubernetes cluster out, not in Azure, but you can control it from Azure. Azure Migration is a unified one-stop shop for various migration scenarios. What we've recently added is the ability and support to convert web apps that currently run on a VM and migrate them into a container. Once they're in a container, they're in idle kind of state to be migrated to Azure. New version of Forms Recognizer. Documents contain a lot of information that power core business processes. We can extract that information from documents with minimal manual intervention and just kind of enables efficiency and productivity. Another new service has hit GA, weather services. So if you want to build real-time, location-aware weather forecasts and warnings into your apps, weather services can provide that. And then last one is static web apps. It's under preview, but it now supports Azure DevOps. There's a Twitter handle there. That's where I kind of post 5 or 6 items a day of things that are new. Learning Paths. If you haven't looked at Microsoft Learn recently, check it out. It's a hub for learning content, includes modules, learning paths, information around certifications, and our curated video platform called Learn TV. Got different topics divided into modules, and those modules form kind of learning paths. The learning in there is kind of gamified, so you can gain points by learning. The other really nice thing is it can provision sandboxed environments. So it can, if you're doing a Kubernetes or API management course, you can just spin up a Azure subscription to do the tasks in that. So it's a kind of sandbox that's separate from any of your kind of corporate subscriptions. So it's very nice. One more thing. Okay, regulations in UK public sectors enforce everybody to have a legal duty to make sure websites and apps meet accessibility requirements. Commercial organizations should also adhere to those requirements just because it's the right thing to do. And I believe many of us in the app dev community have still got lots to learn here. We need to be on board and encourage everybody to build products that enrich the lives of people with all people and all disabilities. One ask I've got is what I'd like to see, and I know we've got features in Azure DevOps that can do this, is to bake accessibility checking into the DevOps processes. In the same way that we do scanning, we scan for vulnerable code, let's build scanning for poor accessibility compliance into the DevOps processes. If anybody wants to do that or is doing it, please reach out, because I think we can get some good stories around that. Okay, final app. I don't know if we've answered everybody's question. I know there's a number of questions coming in QA. It's been really hard to answer QA and also present. So if we're not addressing questions on the Q&A channel, reach out. There's my contact details there. Please give us feedback. Give us, a smiley face, good, bad, or ugly, sad face, happy face. Just reach out. Let us know, because if we get good feedback, we know we're doing the right thing. If we get bad feedback, we can learn from it. Ideas from content, that's also useful. I'm also open if anybody wants to present, as long as it kind of fits into the kind of remit that it's something new, something of interesting, something that people don't know. If you fancy presenting to this community, that's good as well. I've already said, I'm here to help. Reach out if I can help. Recording slides will be made available. Next event, we've got a planned event. In fact, Dave's going to come back and present on integration services, and there's a new runtime of Logic Apps where the Logic App runtime can actually run inside a container. So that means you can actually run kind of Logic Apps, not just in Azure. Also flag Microsoft Build, 25th, 27th of May. Can I ask you also, when we send out invites, please share them with colleagues that might be interested in that dev. Final slide, that's my contact details. Kind of sun setting there, but it's looking good out the window. It's looking sunny, good for the weekend. Thank you for attending. Apologies about the timing. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. The recording will stop, but I understand the Q&A channel will remain. So we will monitor any kind of questions that come through. Other than that, please send the questions to me on them. So thank you.